Hey everybody, I'm really glad you found Suncrest Messages. I do hope you'll take a minute to subscribe to either our podcast or our YouTube channel. And you can also download the Suncrest app. There's great stuff there that goes far beyond these messages. Either way, I hope that the next 30 minutes helps you integrate faith with your life. Enjoy. If you announce to somebody that you don't care about something, it's one of the most powerful things that you can do. There are times when it's positive, and there are absolutely times when it's negative. Let me give you a couple examples. I think it's usually positive if you are carrying a weight, you feel like you're failing at something or not doing something well, and someone you respect, who you think you're probably disappointing, comes to you and says, I don't care about those failures. Early on in my ministry at Suncrest, I was doing student ministry, I was pouring myself, I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do and things that would work, and none of it was working. I was planning events and nobody was showing up, and even at times I thought, like, maybe I'm not supposed to be a pastor. But our lead pastor at the time, my mentor, John Wiesel, he came up to me and he said, Greg, all those things you're feeling, I don't care. Like, you're doing it right. You're putting yourself into it. Eventually the fruit will come. And it was so freeing to me that someone said, don't worry about it. In a more powerful way, I got to witness this once where I saw a daughter, she was in her early 20s at the time, who had greatly disrespected her parents, had gone the wrong way, had been defiant the whole time. She ended up pregnant with nowhere to go, and so she came home. And she steps in, I witnessed this with my own eyes. She steps into a conversation with her dad, and all she starts to do is say, I did this wrong, I did this wrong, I did this wrong, I did this wrong. And he put his hands on her shoulders and looked her in the eye, and he said, I don't care. Welcome home. And maybe the reason that's so powerful to me, it is the exact image of who God is. When many people, maybe you at some point in your life, have felt like, I've gone too far against God. I've done too many things wrong. I'm off the reservation. I don't know. But God's response is a response of forgiveness and cleansing that says the past is the past. I don't care. Let's move forward. So sometimes it's very positive to hear the words, I don't care. But it also can be negative. A number of years ago, I was teaching right here and was talking about a subject that I felt like wasn't that big of a deal, and I wanted people to know it wasn't that big of a deal. And so on that subject, I just said to the whole audience, I said, I don't care. Years later, I'm at Costco, and I run into a couple who had been part of our church for a long time, but it hadn't hit me until I saw them that I hadn't seen them much lately, and it felt like there was some distance in the relationship. So I went over and said hi to them and started a conversation. I said, I feel like I've been missing you. They said, actually, you have, Greg. They said, it all goes back to that message you did when something that was important to them, I announced from the platform that I don't care. And if you tell someone you don't care about something they care about, it catches them. They actually told me, they said, actually around our house, Greg, when we don't care about something, we want to announce it, we say, we're pulling a Greg Lee. I don't care. I'm like, oh, wow. So one of the conversations that I get to have with people a lot, I ask people, I'm like, what do you care about? Like, what are you devoted to? What really drives you? And what's interesting to me is when I have that conversation with people, usually I get a very vague response from people. And I'm not entirely sure why. I have a couple of guesses. Sometimes I think it's because I'm a pastor and people think there's a right answer to my question when I ask you what you care about, or maybe you don't care about the things I think you should care about, but you don't want to admit it. Like, there's all kinds of things going on in that. But most of the time, I actually read that people genuinely don't know what they care about. It's not just a vague answer, it's fuzzy in their mind. To say, what are you most devoted to? And so I want to have a conversation today on this last week of what makes Jesus mad about what you're devoted to, what you care about, and what you don't care about. And let me begin just by asking this question. What are you pouring yourself into? Like, for you, what or who are you pouring yourself into? What are you fighting for? Or what are you fighting against? What is it that when it requires blood, sweat, tears, sacrifice, you're like, I'm still in. I'm going for it. I really care. What do you really care about? And be specific. Don't just say, I care about my family. Like, what do you care about for your family? And maybe the inverse of the question is a helpful way to think about it also. This is actually the way Jesus is going to present it today. What are you indifferent to? What is it that you don't care about? What is it that you're for it, I guess, but the moment it asks for blood, sweat, tears, or sacrifice, you're like, yeah, I don't care about that much. I'm out. What is it that's third, fourth, or fifth on your priority list, which essentially means it's not a priority and it doesn't get your time at all? What is it that you're indifferent about? Because this is my conviction. I think this is what Jesus is going to teach us. The things we're indifferent about, they have consequences, right? They're the things we let slide by in life. And what we care about when we get to the end of our life has shaped our life and our influence, and the things we decided not to care about, that also shaped life. So Eli Wiesel was a Holocaust survivor, and I think that part of the context is helpful for us thinking about this quote. This is so powerful. He says, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. It's saying, I don't care. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, it's indifference. And he writes that from the perspective of being on the receiving end of some people's indifference and then living a life that was consequential afterwards that would not allow himself to be indifferent. Now, before I dive into the text today, I want to acknowledge something in the room. It's probably as big on this subject as any other subject. There are people in this room who are not followers of Jesus. Like, you'd say that. Like, no, I'm not a Christian. Jesus is not the North Star for my life. That's not who I am. There are others of you who are followers of Jesus. Like, it's the defining thing about your life. And I actually, just for a moment, I'm not going to have you show your hands, but I want you to think about which one you are. Are you not a follower of Jesus, or are you a follower of Jesus? Because, of course, when it comes to the things we care about or don't care about, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not would divide this very cleanly, right? There's no other way to think about it. So let me talk to those of you who aren't followers of Jesus for a moment. First of all, I'm glad you're here. I have a lot of respect for you. The journey of faith, I've seen it many times play out in our church, is a winding road. And I don't know exactly why you're here today. Some of you may be on a genuine spiritual journey. You came here to explore whether Jesus was who he said he was, things like that. Some of you are just here because a really hot girl asked you to come to church today. Honestly, whatever reason you're here, I don't care. But I do know this. I've seen people take that journey and eventually become followers of Jesus. And I've seen people take that journey and decide not to be followers of Jesus. Your role, if you're not a follower of Jesus here today, is as an observer. You're going to get to see something about who Jesus is and decide whether you resonate with it or not. Let me talk to those of you who are followers of Jesus. You know, faith itself is a winding road, right? Just because you have faith doesn't mean there aren't ups and downs. It actually is full of ups and downs. But the thing for a follower of Jesus is there's a lot of clarity around this simple phrase: Jesus is Lord. He is the North Star of my life. And while I might sway off course from time to time, I know where I need to come back to. I have some conviction about it. He is my North Star. And so when we're having a conversation about what you care about or what you're indifferent about, for someone who's a follower of Jesus, we're trying to align our cares and concerns with his. Now, I'm going to tell you a story here in a little bit of Jesus' life where he talks about something that people are indifferent about, that he's kind of mad about. But the story will actually come during his ministry. And I don't know if maybe I just think about this too much, but I always think for people who were figuring out how to follow Jesus in real time, like before he ever died on the cross or rose from the dead, like I want to give them a lot of grace because, they're just figuring it out as they go. Some of the scriptures that we get are written to people who are frankly like us. Like we believe, we know Jesus poured himself out for us. He died for us and rose again. And now we're looking at it through that lens. And one of the things Jesus says to that group of people, to people like us, he says this in the book of Revelation to a church. He says, I know your deeds, that you're neither cold nor hot. I wish you were one or the other. He's like, indifference, this thing in the middle. It's kind of the worst of all possible options. So because you are lukewarm, neither hot nor cold, I am about to spit you out of my mouth. Now, I don't want that to be your only view of who Jesus is. I absolutely want you to fully understand who Jesus is with his grace and his forgiveness and one who would welcome us home, one who would die for you. That's who Jesus is. But one of the things we're doing in this message is we're figuring out that, yes, Jesus was angry about certain things, and I want to make sure I know that part of who Jesus was also. And I hope in all the healthiest ways this series has given you license to be angry about very particular things. Now, it can be dangerous, because here's what I know about myself. About 80% of the time when I do things out of anger, I have to apologize for them later. They were not the right thing to do. And there is that 20% of the time when the anger actually was the right prompting. Aristotle actually said it like this: anybody can become angry. That's easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, to bring precision to the application of your anger, that is not easy. But it is healthy, and it's what Jesus constantly did. So let me start big. Jesus is angry at indifference. And then start to narrow it. I'll narrow it first to the place we've been for the whole series. Jesus said, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You shut the kingdom of heaven, the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces." As you heard me say, Jesus' whole mission was to throw the doors of the kingdom of heaven wide open to everyone. So anyone who was shutting the kingdom of heaven, that was a problem. But I wanted to zero in on this before I narrow it a little more. This phrase, kingdom of heaven. I know you have your masks on, but would you just say this out loud with me? These three words, kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven. What does that mean? Well, whenever you hear that phrase, kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God, this is the most important thing to Jesus. He's our king, and there's a kingdom. And this kingdom has two aspects. You always have to push on both of these. Part of the kingdom of heaven is about what will come after we die. It's the afterlife. It's the kingdom of heaven. And one of the things the scriptures teach is that some people in the afterlife, for all eternity, will spend life with God. And other people, this is true, will spend all of eternity, all of the afterlife, apart from God. And for people who follow Jesus, this conviction that you might be part of shutting, or at least not opening, the kingdom of heaven to everyone, like that's a problem. And we've gone through these examples of different racial groups, different genders, different people who had different religious experiences. We've done that all over the last few weeks. I just want you to hear this. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have conviction around an afterlife. I have a friend of mine who is a follower of Jesus, my best friend. And he told me about a conversation he was having with a friend of his once who was not a follower of Jesus. And here's what that guy said to him. He said, "Listen, if I believed what you believe about the afterlife, I would crawl over broken glass so that every person I loved would have every opportunity to experience that." He was saying, I don't believe it, so I don't do that. But if you believe in the kingdom of heaven, then to not do everything you can to throw the doors wide open, like that, you're almost like an evil person not to do that. So there's the kingdom of heaven that is the afterlife. And then there's the kingdom of heaven that is the here and now. Like Jesus' prayer is, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so I want to set up for you kind of a continuum. Maybe you'll be able to sort yourself out on this, about like what you're indifferent about or what you're devoted to in terms of your work in this world, in the here and now. So let's start with the most obvious negative, evil. All right? Anyone in the room devoted to evil? Don't raise your hand. That would be a bad idea. Hopefully there's nobody in this room that's devoted to evil, but there are people in this world that's what they're devoted to. They're devoted to evil. It happens. One step over from that is people who are devoted to self. And honestly, I think most of humanity lives in this slot. People's North Star in their life is their own comfort, their family's security. They want to have some enjoyable experiences. They want to chase happiness. They would like to live in a nice house. And if they had some wealth, that would be good too. And most people, maybe you, I don't know. Like the aim of life, what you're not indifferent to is your own comfort. That you'll chase. If something means blood, sweat, or tears, or sacrifice, the temptation is to say, I'm out. There is a healthier step than being devoted to self, and I'll just kind of call this betterment. These are the kind of people in this world who want to leave the world a better place than they found it. They don't want to be self-referential or self-focused. They want to be people who are raising good kids, who are helping meet needs, who are doing good things in this world, trying to make the world a better place. And there's some nobility to that. But there's one place left, and this is, of course, for the followers of Jesus, and it is a place that says, I'm devoted to kingdom come. I'm devoted to the kingdom of heaven, the message of Jesus, the redemption that people can experience, the forgiveness and grace of God in people's lives, and the power of the Holy Spirit working itself out to serve a world selflessly with great blood, sweat, tears, and sacrifice in order to bring the kingdom of heaven here and now. And I would like to ask you, I'll just pause for a few seconds to say, if you look at this list and you say, what am I indifferent to? Or what am I devoted to? What's your answer? See, Jesus was mad when there was indifference to opening up, to bringing about the kingdom of heaven in people's lives. And then he zeroes in on a very specific segment. This is a fascinating story where we see Jesus' anger. Follow this with me. It says, people were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them. Let me give you a little context historically. In today's world, people dote on children, right? There's a cute kid running around and they get all kinds of attention. You know, if our 2-year-old's out in the commons area after this service, somebody will come up and be like, oh, he's so cute. That's how people do it in today's Western world. That is not the way children were viewed in first century Palestine. In first century Palestine, you had kids and then you had some more kids because there was work to be done. And you go through raising them so that they could take care of the work and then they could take care of you when you were older. Like they were functional beings. And so when people were bringing their children to Jesus, the disciples did what probably people expected them to do. The disciples rebuked them. Hey, the disciples are angry. Jesus doesn't have time for kids. Jesus is trying to change the world. He'd probably want to invest in people who can understand and go do something about it. Like that's who Jesus is, right? But we actually get a little anger competition here. The disciples are angry that people are bringing their kids to Jesus. And then it says, when Jesus saw this, he was indignant. What a great word. He was mad. He did not want people to misunderstand that to him, the next generation is of the highest value. It says, he said to them, this is actually something he said to the disciples, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. And so, yeah, Jesus was mad at indifference. He was mad at indifference getting into the kingdom of heaven. But let me zero this in. This is where I want to leave us today. I want you to think about this. Jesus was mad when there was indifference to opening up the kingdom of heaven specifically to the next generation. To people who were children and teenagers and adolescents. He wanted there to be a focus on making sure that group of people got the kingdom of heaven. Actually, in the Gospel of Matthew, follow this, you'll get a good picture of his anger. He says, if any one of these little ones, those who believe in me, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better, get this, for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. I mean, he's just going for it here. This was a version of capital punishment in their day. That's what he was saying. It sounds a little to me like The Sopranos. I mean, like Tony Soprano, like, don't mess with the kids, or you'd be swimming with the fishes. That was a horrible impression. By the way, just move on from that. But this is the point. This is the point. Jesus is bringing definition to something. He's saying, if you don't open up the kingdom of heaven, especially to children and teenagers, the next generation, you should just go ahead and tie a stone around your neck, get thrown into the sea. That is not right. Don't be indifferent about kids encountering the kingdom. Now, you can ask the question, why would Jesus say this? Why is this so important to him? Well, I think there's lots of reasons, right? Some of it's math. You can invest in older people, that's fine. They have a little longer to live. You invest in kids, and they have a lot longer to live. Some of it's innocence. That's one of the places Jesus would go in the conversation. He would say, listen, these are blank slate kids. How about before they make horrible decisions that cause great pain and regret in their lives, how about we reach them at their point of innocence, teach them the way to live in the kingdom of heaven, and help them to avoid as much of that pain as is possible? But I think ultimately Jesus was interested in transforming the world, and this is what he knew. When you change older people, you change individuals. I love the chance to baptize somebody who's 80 or 70, like it changes their life. But if you want to change the world, change the kids. If you want to see how worlds actually transition, how transformation actually comes on a large scale, it happens when generations turn over and there's a new view in the younger generation. And Jesus knew this. And so he wants the kingdom of heaven to be invested in children and in teenagers, not just worrying about adults. And he was mad if people who were his followers were indifferent to that. So I want to ask you in some very specific ways today, if necessary, to adjust the passions of your life, to care about what Jesus cared about, and definitely not to be indifferent yourself about something he cared much about. So let me talk to a few groups of people. Parents, you're raising this generation right now. You have young kids, you have teenagers. I'm in that setting myself. And as a parent who's a follower of Jesus, I think this is the message. Don't let the other forces of this world, the other things that people will try to draw you to, don't let those elevate and your investment in your child's walk with Jesus, his encounter with Christ, his redemption in Christ, to somehow be deflated. I'm a parent. I know the pressures of this. I know the world says you should invest more than anything else in your child's education, and I believe in education. There are forces, you guys know this, plenty of forces that say athletic pursuits, artistic pursuits, other pursuits, like you're not a good parent if you don't pour everything you have. Focus your child on pursuing those things. And those things aren't awful. They're not. But if they're first, the social development of kids, you should value it. You want to make sure you pay attention to that as a parent. But here's what happens. Education, athletics, arts, social stuff, all gets right here. For parents who follow Jesus, and kingdom of heaven gets right here. And Jesus is telling us, don't sleep on this. Don't be the parent that gets this out of whack because you don't want to be the parent at 17 or 22 or when they're 25 and you think, I missed it. They were the all-star on their baseball team. And they're walking away from their faith. Parents, do not be indifferent to the kingdom of heaven in the nurturing of your child. Let me talk to the aunts and uncles in the room, the grandparents, The people who are good neighbors in your neighborhood, and you know some of the kids in your neighborhood, or you're a coach on a baseball team or a softball team or a soccer team. Like, you know kids that aren't your kids. That's my point. Any one of you who is investing in kids to some degree, make sure you're not sleeping on your investment of the kingdom of God in those kids. As someone who's a parent and has plenty of struggles with this myself, I can't tell you how grateful I am that there are other people in my life, besides me as the parent, who will speak faith and hope and forgiveness and faith into my children's lives. Aunts and uncles, grandparents, neighbors, coaches. The kingdom of heaven. Do not be indifferent about placing that in the next generation people that you know. As a church, I say this kind of as often as I can, and sometimes I worry that people will be offended by it, but I keep saying it. We have a stated goal to constantly get younger and younger and younger as a church. Do I like old people? I do like old people. I'm quickly becoming one of the old people. But I have no desire to lead a church whose average age is 40 this year, and 10 years from now it's 50, and 10 years after that it's 60. There's lots of churches that go that direction. And our devotion, and the thing we ask people to sacrifice for, is to say, no, Jesus told us. The kingdom of heaven in the next generation. We cannot be indifferent about that. And I got to tell you, it means lots of things. If you think about it, you'll understand this. As a financial model for a church, it's a horrible financial model. Like, if you want to be a rich church, don't invest in the kids. But I don't want to be a rich church. I want to be a church that cares about the things that Jesus cares about. And I want you, as part of our church, to be part of that care. And there's different ways that it happens. I mean, my goodness, I am blown away by people's generosity to help us do this as a church. For people who don't even have kids or grandkids, or they're not here. It's so powerful to me that there's not an indifference. And actually today I want to ask some of you, not all of you, to consider something very specific. We invest in, preschool and elementary school, all those ages, and we invest in middle school and high school. And actually right now at our church, it's actually a very strategic season for middle school and high school. Our middle school ministry has started up again over the last couple of weeks, and actually the number of students showing up there are the greatest percentage return of any age group, adults or kids or anything else that we have. And we could use some people, maybe you, who would say, you know what, I'll raise my hand. I remember what it was like to be in middle school. Or I know those middle schoolers are awkward, but I'm kind of awkward too. Maybe that's what you're saying today. I'm awkward too. I'd care about them. And I don't think this is everybody in the room, but I wonder if there's a dozen people in the room today who should raise your hand. Say, I'll make a commitment to that. You can text this number right here. Just text the words "next gen" to that number. And it's not just middle school. In just a couple of weeks here, we're restarting our high school ministry. And we have lots of high school students at Suncrest who need someone who's not their mom and dad, but who cares. And I don't know about you, but high school was a very consequential time for me in my identity and in my faith. And there were some people at the church I grew up in who absolutely shaped that. And again, I don't think it's everybody in the room, but maybe this sounds weird to say, but I wonder if the Spirit is falling on you right now. Say, actually, I do care. I care about middle school or high school students. I'd at least entertain a conversation about it. I'd be up for, making a commitment to be a part of some students' lives, to bring Christ's kingdom to them. And so would you right now just grab your phone and say, oh, I'll just text that number, next gen to that number. I think that could be a place where God could use me, maybe even be used by God to change life. This is what I know. Indifference made Jesus mad. Indifference to closing the door of the kingdom on people made Jesus mad. But very specifically, not opening the door of the kingdom to the next generation made Jesus mad. Listen, I don't want you to walk out of here at the end of this series feeling like Jesus is mad about everything about you. He's not. His disposition toward people is that he loves them, that he cares, that he forgives, that he's a God of grace, that you can always come home. And then when you've come home, he wants you to set some priorities. He wants you to care about what he cares about. And I want you to care about what he cares about too. Well, I really hope that was helpful for integrating faith with life. Listen, if you're in Northwest Indiana, I'd love to have you join us in person. Head over to suncrest.org and plan your visit.